Hey everyone, Jeff Keane here with wirelessvideoblog.com, bringing you yet another edition of my CWNP series. Today we will be looking at the CWAP exam, but more in particular, we will be looking at how the CWNP organization references the 802.11 protocols, specifically the physical layer protocols within the consolidated amendments. So when I say consolidated amendment, what does that mean? Well, what ended up ultimately happening in around 2007 is the IEEE went back and they looked and they saw that they had all of these amendments to the original .11 standard, and they decided, there's just way too many places that people have to go in order to look up, different amendments. So they decided, let's consolidate it all into a single resource that you can go and get all of the information on all of the original amendments to the .11 standard. So they ended up coming up with this 802.11-2007 consolidated amendment, which took all of those previous letter-based amendments, so 802.11a, b, 802.11i, g, all of those physical layer protocols and some of the other security protocols and other amendments, and they consolidated them all into this single reference that people could go to. But when they did that, they actually changed the letter-based amendment system that we're used to and turned them into individual clauses within this 2007 standard. So no longer do you reference 802.11a, you would end up ultimately referencing a clause to this 2007 standard, and we'll go through what each one of those clauses are. One thing to note is that since the 2007 consolidated standard has come out, they've done it once again in 2012. They took all of the amendments that occurred since 2007, and then they basically took the 2007 standard and consolidated it with all these additional amendments and turned it into what they call the 802.11-2012 standard. And the one thing you should know is if you are preparing for your CWAP exam as of right now, 2014, you want to make sure that you reference the 2007 and not the 2012 consolidated amendments. The reason is that the 2012 ended up rearranging some of the clauses, so you might end up getting confused when, say, they go to reference clause 17. You might think it's 802.11a, but in the 2012 standard it might be 802.11b. I'm not sure if that's actually what the clause changes are, but that's just an example of what could potentially happen. So you definitely want to make sure that you focus on the 2007 consolidated standard and not the 2012. So when they went in and they started applying all of the original amendments to the .11 standard, they assigned them individual clauses, and if you recall, and we'll get into more detail in a separate video on the physical layer, but if you recall, the original .11 standard actually had 3 different physical layer options that you could choose from. There was frequency hopping spread spectrum, direct sequence spread spectrum, both of which were in the 2.4 frequencies, and then there was also an infrared option. Infrared never really took off, but for a while there, FHSS, or frequency hopping, and DSSS, direct sequence spread spectrum, were, there were some groups out there that were really battling to get one to win out over the other. If you remember Beta versus VHS, very similar battle occurred with that. Or for those of you that are a little bit younger, you might remember the DVD wars with the DVD minus versus the plus. Similar battles occurred between frequency hopping and direct sequence spread spectrum. Ultimately, DSSS won out, as we all will be aware if we aren't already, with 802.11b. But when they took those 3 different physical layer mediums and put them into the 2007 standard, they gave each one their own clause. So frequency hopping spread spectrum became clause 14, DSSS or direct sequence spread spectrum became clause 15, and infrared became clause 16. So when you go to the CWAP exam and they reference clause 15, you just need to know that that's the original 802.11 standard using direct sequence spread spectrum, which of course gives you 1 and 2 megabits per second of data rate, physical data rate in the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. And again, we'll go through more of that in a later video. But of course, after the original amendment or the original standard came out, they amended it with 802.11a, which now becomes clause 17. There was also 802.11b, which became clause 18 in the 2007 reference, and 802.11g becomes clause 19. Now, there are some additional ways that the CWNP talks about each one of these standards. For instance, you might see the original .11 standard referenced as DSSS, whereas the 802.11a standard might be referenced as OFDM, 802.11b might be referenced as high rate DSSS or HR DSSS, and G, since it also uses OFDM as its modulation technique, might be referenced as ERP OFDM or extended rate physical OFDM. And again, we will get into that further in the physical layer videos that I'll be making. The last reference that they do talk about in the 2007 standard, or at least in the CWNP exams, is 802.11n, which they reference as clause 20, or sometimes they reference it as HT or high throughput. 802.11ac is something that is out now, but because it is so new, they obviously don't reference it in the current revision of the CWAP exam, but do not be surprised if they end up coming out with something in a newer revision of the exam down the road. This will more than likely end up getting an additional clause once it ends up being fully ratified and rolled into into a new consolidated standard. But that is essentially how the CWNP references the protocols within the 802.11 standard and all the amendments to the standard. So definitely want to memorize those clause to protocol references because it will be necessary within the exam itself. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.